Tēnā koutou, ko Christian Shota ho, no taputeranga ho, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome, it's great to have such an informal atmosphere where everybody here is chatting, and also welcome to those of you joining us on Zoom. We hope the connection is stable and good. It is my pleasure to welcome everybody to this first of our new seminar series sessions, where Prime, which is something that sits within the faculty, hosts a range of different speakers through the... Sorry, I'll just turn down the speakers a little bit. Through the year, and we termed this the... And I need to turn down that speaker a little bit. I think that's the problem. Apologies. How's that? Good. Right, no more echo. Right, apologies for that, which we call the Funded Chair Series on Sustainable Development. And it's our pleasure to have our first speaker today, Professor Siah Hwee Ang, who will be speaking to building sustainable ecosystems through the nexus of quality education and decent work and economic growth. And those of you familiar with the SDGs will already pick out that there are two prominent SDGs in there. Before I hand over to Professor Ang, I would like to just give a little bit of context to this seminar series. Because Prime is hosting it, so I think there's some value in explaining briefly what Prime is. It's an initiative that exists within business schools. It is powered, so to speak, by the United Nations, and Prime is the principle of responsible management education. And as you can see here in its mission, it's about transforming management education, so business schools particularly, research and thought leadership globally, through the principles that exist, through developing learning communities such as this, and through promoting awareness of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that is the context, and that's why Prime is very excited to be able to host the seminar series. And just to give you an overview, because this is the first in our series, we're going to kick off today with Professor Ang, and he will talk to SDG 4 and 8. He is the professorial chair for business in Asia. And if you are interested in this seminar series, please take the time now or at the end to sign up to our mailing list, so it's easier for us to reach you when we circulate information about these seminars. Oh, sorry, I didn't, oh, good. No, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the link. That went AWOL. Right, so to kick this off, SDG 4, SDG 8, and I hand over to Professor Siah Hwee. Thank you very much.
I'm just trying to work out whether this thing actually have batteries or not. Welcome to the teaching room. All right, so it works. Thanks, Christian, for getting me involved. So, I mean, I know quite a lot of you in the room, but also, as you know, I try not to be a bit too serious in all my talks. So if I make funny jokes that you don't like, apologies for that. But to start with, when I was approached by Christian, the phone call comes and you say, okay, the chairs are doing the, United Nations SDG. So are you going to do something about it? I say, well, we are all here to make the world a better place, right? And so I went to the website immediately and I say, it looks like I'm doing quite a few of those out of the 17, and I can speak to at least 4 and 8. Right, and hence my promise accidentally to Christian, and all of a sudden I get the first slot. out of the blue. But it's actually great to be here to talk about a particular topic that I like, which transcends a bit into the education, into the business sector, which I will tell a sort of a short story about my sort of engagement throughout for the whole, not just in terms of my time in Victoria, but also, why actually we see some of the things that I do in that particular space as well. So I titled it the Building Sustainable Ecosystem Through the Nexus of Quality Education and Decent Work and Economic Growth, right? As you can see here, these are actually two of the SDGs, right? SDG 4 and SDG 8. Now, before I go in and tell us all about what I actually do on a daily basis as the chair in business in Asia, as well as the director of the Southeast Asia CAPE, right, Center of Asia Pacific Excellence, I thought I better defend myself for being here, Christian, right, by highlighting some of the areas that I believe I tick the box when it comes to the things I do as a chair and as well as a director of Asia Pacific Center around Asia. Now, so substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. Right. So bear some of these headings in mind, because as I go through some of the things that I do, they will be there. Now, and of course, you have global citizenship and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Now, the third item under this heading with quality education is around substantially increase the supply of qualified teachers, including through international cooperation for teacher training in developing countries, especially least developed countries and small island developing states. So those are the three items that I think it fits the bill with what I do as the chair in business in Asia. Now, in terms of decent work and economic growth, right? The two items that I can single out is 8.2, achieve higher levels of economic productivity through diversification, technological upgrading and innovation, including through a focus on high value add and labor intensive sectors, as well as encourage the formalization and growth of micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. Okay, so when I actually go through some of these sustainability things, it reminds me of some conversations that we have about sustainability. So I remember last year, for example, in the last 2 years when the Southeast Asia CAPE, or I as the director of the Southeast Asia CAPE, is part of a working group that try to craft business sustainability. In other words, we try to create kind of sustainable businesses. In other words, to make sure that business can sustain. It's almost like dealing with a pandemic, how do businesses survive, right? It turns out that between the 10 of us, not just people from New Zealand, but also people from Southeast Asia as well as a few others from other regions as well, we have actually a lot of misconceptualization. What does the word sustainability means? Right, for many people, the sustainability means that as long as you paint your truck green, you look like you are sustainable, right? And for others, it means different things, right? If you talk about business sustainability, then it's a totally different kind of word. It's to how to make them constantly being able to survive on the regime, right? Whether it's survival or actually growth, it doesn't matter. Now, the same with education. We talk about not just one-off education like an individual course or a program, but also, in the university here, for example, we talk about things like, lifelong learning, right, and all aspects of it. So we put education as part of everyone's sort of life, rather than to say that they should only do it when they are dealing with primary school, secondary school, and then college, and then after that, tertiary education, you are done, right? It's never done. And bear in mind that is not just to sustain the university finances, right? It's not about selling them more programs, just we can run it through. But I think there's a lot of education that needs to be required across a person's lifetime over there. Now, the next 5 minutes, I will talk about a little bit of my background before I jump into why we see what we are doing in the CCAPE in particular, right? So my background goes like this. Accidentally, I was in New Zealand. one of my first jobs after my PhD from National University of Singapore is to send out 100 applications to find a job, but you'll be surprised, about 20 years ago, the National University of Singapore is not even accredited. Right? Sounds amazing that 20 years ago they were not accredited, but they are number one in Asia now. So when I was searching for jobs, 100 applications, no responses for a while, and finally two institutions responded. One is University of Waikato University in Hamilton. That was the first time I actually traveled down to New Zealand. And then, of course, within a week, I get an offer from London, to which then I flew to London and decided to hang around there. Right, instead, the Waikato folks, some folks are still around there, not very pleased with the fact that they offered me before I left Waikato, but I didn't show up again. So subsequently, when I left London, I searched for some jobs, and University of Auckland showed up. So I stayed there at the University of Auckland for 10 years, right? So, and you teach, you do research, but in my last years, at the University of Auckland, I became the Associate Dean, right, of postgrads, and which covers, of course, PhD at the University of Auckland Business School, and was a professor at that time as well. So in my last days over there, I did create a lot of different programs, like the New Thought Masters back in 2012, the first of its kind in New Zealand, restructure of the PhD program, recreate of the business, sort of the BCom, right, Bachelor of Commerce at that time. Right, first year studies, Business 101, 102 course that puts the first year programs into smaller classrooms. And then subsequently, of course, I move on, right? And I move on because at Victoria University, they were sounding me out for 3 years in a row, saying that I'm an Asia expert. Right, but for those of you who have been in academia for a long time, there's no such thing as an Asia expert, because there's no such thing as a discipline of Asia. Right, so we don't call ourselves disciplined. We talk about strategy, we talk about international business, but we don't talk about Asia as an expert. But nonetheless, a lot of the things that I do in my past life around programs and design does actually help what we do in the CCAPE moving forward. And you can see, as you can see from the first slide here, right, these are actually just business programs alone. So we have sort of two areas of focus, right? Actually, three areas of focus. One is around business engagement. Is to engage with businesses, of course. The other one is education engagement, right? Of course, it's to engage with tertiary education for the most part, and the value chain that leads to the business. And of course, the third part is public engagement, which is almost sessions like this as well at the same time, about trying to inform New Zealanders or New Zealand organizations when it comes to engagement with Southeast Asia. That's my remit. I see the CAPES, right? So we have three CAPES in the university system, and there are three. So one, North Asia, that is residing in University of Auckland. The second one, Latin America CAPE, residing here as well at Victoria University. And the third one, Southeast Asia, is the one that I run. But even though the CCAPE resides here, but it's reporting to University of Waikato, Auckland, University of Auckland, Otago, and Victoria, of course, right? So the four universities. But given that I've been the chair for the last 7 years, and it's no surprises that I'm actually sort of capable to deal with many bosses, right? So I'm a man with many bosses, right? Throughout my time that you run, not just reporting to a lot of advisory board for the chair, but also at the same time reporting to multiple universities, multiple stakeholders in my role as the CCAPE director. So in general, now what does the CAPE does, right, in terms of the programs that I feed into the system, is around the fact that one thing that the CAPES has been asked to do is to try to transfer knowledge, or sort of transit the kind of knowledge that we have in the university system to try to help with the businesses out there, right? It was set up in that way. If we have Q&A, I'm happy to explain a bit further. Now, the second thing is to try to make sure that we actually produce enough good students of the future so that they can help to enable the businesses out there, right? And to that, right, I see a lot of sustainability of the businesses right there in that program. Now, just very briefly, right, so some of these things that we do, including workshops for businesses, for New Zealand businesses, and we do that across different regions. We do about 20 to 25 of those in a year. We also run internships across the nation, internships around programs that sort of enable them to help small, medium enterprises. Right, and that's why one of the sustainability things that I highlight is about micro, small, medium enterprises, and there's a catch there that yes, these are the organizations that doesn't have resources, so we are trying to help them along in those dimensions. Now, we also develop business projects and create resources, right? So the title here is more like resources to which is a feeder, right, to sort of agencies or sort of a feeder to agencies who actually help businesses or actually direct feeder into businesses about the knowledge in that region or how New Zealand can deal with that region as well. Now, we are also part of a wider network around with the ASEAN Forum as well as the New Zealand ASEAN Business Alliance, right? This is to try to create a hub in the Southeast Asia region, to which, you know, CCAPE is part of the conduit, but also links all the New Zealand businesses into Southeast Asia using our regional hubs. Right, we don't have to pay for it, but at the same time, you know, those are actually Kiwi presence in those countries. So we actually managed to organize that, all the conduits together, and then we hub through the New Zealand system, which has got New Zealand ASEAN Business Council, our close partner, as well as Southeast Asia Cape Plus. Of course, MFED and NZTE are also part of the regime as well. Now, in order to try to sort of be a bit more productive, right, we also realize that there's probably a catch here to try to focus some of these sort of programs, right, some of these programs into these industries. And we know tourism is, you know, fighting very hard, right, to try to sustain, okay, so we do still have some tourism training programs, but more likely it's not face-to-face anymore. People get tired about that, especially in the tourism industry. Christian will know that. So it's more about resources creation, right, to help people to push through and to try to promote a lot more about the New Zealand, right, as a very good tourist place and still keep people warm about coming back at some point when the borders are open. But we also, and education is our business as usual, to which we are all doing it. But nonetheless, we also look into future industries such as those two that I've listed here, food and nutrition. And this is one of the industries that are sort of a wide sector, right, to which New Zealand has a lot of future inside there, right? Of course, we are not talking about, you know, supply of raw materials or supply of raw food or just fruits, right? We are talking about the ability to create, say, for example, nutraceuticals and, you know, further food processing and all sorts of healthcare related kind of food into the regimes, right? In this case, of course, my coverage is only Southeast Asia, but nonetheless, it's about trying to use that as a way to try to sustain our own businesses engagement there, as well as sort of in some ways also teach others how to use, right, some of this kind of technology that we have in New Zealand, right, and sort of license and all sorts of training that New Zealand organizations can do for Southeast Asia as well, and to actually sort of being able to exchange a lot of things. So building quite a lot of presence in that space of trying to make sure that you know, New Zealand organizations in that space, and not just in that food and nutrition space, but also the digital and creative export space, to which they can actually continue to grow, right? The small, medium enterprises can continue to grow with the help of some of our sort of resources that we build around these things as well, right? So these are quite industry specifics, but a lot of these, other than their individual programs, we do have all these other programs that bolt onto it. And MIP is one that, you know, it's called Market Insights Program, is one that links it to interns, right? And therefore, I will come to the second sort of remit about, you know, the kind of things that I'm trying to weave together in the ecosystem, right, whereby you talk about, you know, trying to feed the next generation in, right, not feed in terms of food, but feed them into the system to help the businesses going along and train them to how to try to help those businesses when they engage in those markets as well. So the MIP that I've listed there, which is the local internship program, is one of them. But Crosslink, we do have a lot of other programs that is running through, right? So we do have tertiary students that move into travel in three, normally Southeast Asia major cities over the period of 3 weeks to try to interact with New Zealand and local representation, both governments and both businesses as well. Of course, as we know that, the sustainability of travel means that we struggle in that sense, but don't worry, we have responded. So in July this year, we will have another, 16 students from across the country, probably up to 20 we can fund, that travels to Nelson and Christchurch to visit some of these food and nutrition, and this focus is food and nutrition in Singapore in this particular trip. So they will be going around visiting some of these companies like Lincoln Plant and Food, the Pigs Peanut Butters Lab, and so on and so forth, to actually do projects with them in groups, as well as then, of course, hopefully, right, at some stage, they will create these, again, resources for others to be able to use. And hopefully some of these students will also become interns as a result in the coming summer as well for these folks as well. Right, so as you can see, right, if I were to talk about the TMIP students doing interns subsequently and creating resource subsequently, I'm trying to build a journey, right, for a lot of these students, to which that means they don't just engage in one-off activities that we organize, but multiple activities that we organize as well. Now, also we do have a Maori focus in Southeast Asia, right? So we do quite a bit of work with Maori businesses, but we also do quite a bit of sort of Maori specific trips, right? Meeting up with not other indigenous business, but depending on the nature of the kind of business that they interact with. So a lot of these things are actually done in conjunction, not just for student trips. So it's not a student tour. So it's basically business-oriented trips whereby they visit these companies and so on and so forth. Now, so extend to the right-hand side here, we do have a little bit of work that we do quite a lot with Waikato around trying to make sure that there is enough exposure in the secondary school about the Asia-Pacific region, right? So Southeast Asia, in my particular case, that I take care of. So we try to sort of put them into a value chain, right? In some ways, getting good exposure for them, and not just for them. In this case, that's why we have a very special one that talks about teachers as well, right? So talk about teachers as well. So as you know, the system says that if we expose enough to the teachers, we have a better chance of exposing them to the secondary school students. So we are doing a bit of that kind of enabling process as well, trying to enable that capacity so that they can help us to make sure that the younger generations, not all of them have to say, yeah, let's do Asia or Asia Pacific or whatever, right? It means that we at least can get enough exposure out there for those who have that kind of mindset, right, to come forward and start to engage and get us to be able to track them down so that we can actually move them along into the regime as well, right? So for that matter. So we do that kind of moving backwards a bit to the value chain, but we don't do a lot, but we do a lot of resourcing and making sure that they are linked to the tertiary, because some of them actually do become tertiary students, and I've remember quite a few actually ends up in Victoria University as well. And then of course linking education to the next aspects, which is the business side of things as well, from where we sit as part of our business engagement. Now, so for what I've actually mentioned in the previous two slides, this is basically a nutshell, right? And this is, to be honest, a bit not fully updated because this picture goes back a while ago, but most of these programs still exist, right? I'm just trying to show you this activity map. Sorry, the font is a bit too small, so, but I'm just trying to demonstrate, for example, right? Just to give you an example, right here, say the internship program. Okay, so the internship program is somehow linked to the training, right? Utilizing interns and helping out with the cultural acumen tourism training, right? That we have a sort of a partnership with Otago University team, right, around those trainings. So it's linked to internships as well. And these interns, some of them are actually sharing knowledge, okay, because they are also sort of in some ways part of the knowledge sharing regime to which they are actually sort of international savvy, so they share with other secondary school, right, about what kind of knowledge that they have. And of course, they are also feeders into the MRP, so the businesses who actually have interns are also showing up as part of our workshops And being part of the workshops, they are also part of our business seminar series guests sometimes, and sometimes they do show up in big events by invitation because we so happens to have some tickets around there. They are also part related to our sort of business collaterals that we create to fit into the market readiness workshop to which we train them, right? So long story short, the ultimate aim of the whole thing, and this is not the complete picture that I have now, but say for example the food and nutrition sector and the sort of the digital export sector is on the side here. So I'm weaving all these programs into different sectors, right, to which then we can create almost a system of complexity of multiple engagement with individual businesses, multiple engagement with students, and then basically having them go through a journey, right, in an interweave way. And because of who we are, right, it's interesting that the CAPES does have a remit that says that we cannot allow students to take on our activity for credit. So in other words, we cannot sort of like substitute what the university is doing on course credit. So in some ways, our programs also need that flexibility to make sure that the students can almost hop in and hop out, right? So our programs are sort of spread across the year without, say, a trimester decision like we do T1 or we do T3 or that kind of thing. So we do have to structure them around the students' period when they are actually free, right? Which puts us into a lot of sort of ability to scale up. It's very hard to scale up when you crash with courses. I mean, the last thing we want is to steal all the students to leave the classroom and join us on a trip, right? But of course, these days they are not showing up either, so that's a different matter, right? So basically, this is the masterpiece of trying to make them an ecosystem. And I must say that the ecosystem is still evolving, so I can't say that we are celebrating yet. It will take a while for us to actually sort of create something that is massive enough that they keep coming back for things, and the ones who will fit into the system like MFED or NZTE sooner or later will stand up, right, in some of the kind of things that we work with them on as well. So I think this is the last slide as well. Just bear with me on this one. So basically, this is the CAPE metrics that I have for until 2019, right? So 2017 to 19, these are the kind of metrics that we get measured against, roughly, right? At least for the Southeast Asia CAPE. Now, it must be said that in this particular CAPE that I run, because in order to engage with Southeast Asia, English is the business language, so I don't have to train them in terms of the language because there are just too many of them anyway, right? So Bahasa, Mandarin, and this and that. So we don't have a lot of language training, but this is what happens that we have clocked in 2017 to 19. And these are the statistics that we have actually measured in 2020. And just to alert you to the kind of things that we do, for example, so for example, by about 2019, we would have about 451 CK followers on LinkedIn. The last time I checked, we do have about 895 by yesterday, right? So in this 1 year, we have actually grown twice on LinkedIn, followers. Now it's the same for Twitter, right? We have actually grown as well from 599 to about 800 something, right? Smaller growth, but nonetheless there. In terms of our newsletter subscribers, from 1717 to 1091 as well, right? So in terms of the businesses and the participants, we are also growing, right? From 476, right, all the way to about 420 and so on and so forth, right? So this is a system that I'm trying to create so that there are more and more people coming through, but I'm also trying to make sure that the businesses and the individuals who are already in the system can find different things to do, so they are journeyfied, right? Maybe there's no such word, but I like to use this word, right? They are journeyfied through some training so that they actually, the two systems of education and businesses becomes closely knitted, so then we can create a proper ecosystem to which, well, like the word says, is more sustainable. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So clearly, Siah is a very, very busy person, as we learned from that overview. And I also see that the CAPES are more and more crazy about metrics, so it was interesting to see those impressive metrics. And now you have another metric to add.
Well, of course, 17 of them, right?
That's right. And an audience. So I would just like to try and, for the Zoom participants, I'll try and change the camera setting so that they can get the whole room. And I would now like to open this up for the discussion. So the format is designed to be informative, to really get some interesting information out there from the funded chairs, so that they have the opportunity to talk about their work and then to engage in discussion, dialogue. And I would like to invite the audience in the room to start, and I'll check on Zoom whether there are questions from there. Would anyone like to? Yes, Alan.
Thanks very much, Siah. I should declare an interest as to why I do chair Siah's the Campus Advisory Board.
Right.
But having said that, I've always been a bit unclear what sustainable goals actually are in terms of whether they're things that one would hope would apply to individuals or to countries. And in fact, from my time in APEC, I did try and map sustainable development goals onto our programs and gave up in despair because they're easy to map. Bringing this right down to your work, Siah, and your CCAPs, that would say how much are we doing CCAP work for the benefit, basically is a private benefit or social benefit. And if it's the social benefit we're after, are we focused on how it's propagated, how it leads to broader social benefits, and how it avoids the New Zealand leakage problem of New Zealanders getting introduced to Southeast Asia and going off to work there?
Okay. Thanks, Alan. I'm trying to digest your long question, but...
Sorry, for the benefit of the Zoom attendees, could we summarize it very briefly?
You mean the question?
Yes.
Okay. Now I will interpret the question like, okay, is the UN SDGs sort of supposed to see the impact at the national level or at the individual level or the business level? That would be, well, a quick first question. And the second question is about whether, if the businesses are actually the ones that are sort of making sort of good things out of the whole regime, right? Now, what does it say about whether, the CCAP or the activities that we are trying to do necessarily can be mapped onto social goals? Is that fair, Ellen? Right, so the first question, right? I think it relates. My view, right? I mean, my view could be wrong, but my view is that basically, if you just look at those items that list under 17 and those subheadings there, it looks like they have convoluted everything, right? So some of the items they would have talked about nations, some of the items they would talk about the individuals upscaling, some of the items they will be talking about the engagement level. So I interpret it as it can be sort of done at different levels, activities-wise, but when they sum up together, right, technically the world is a better place, right, or at least New Zealand is a better place, right, as a result of that. So that would be my take on that. And relating to the response to the second question, then, yes, there's a danger that when we do these things, we do it, just to help one or two individual business becoming bigger and more profiteering. That doesn't really come back to us, right? So that's why for that matter, we don't normally sort of provide each business too many activities. We normally give them 2 or 3 different types of help. But at the same time, because somehow, we are linked to MFAT and NZTE as well, we do pass it on to others to actually use them, right? But I push them, in terms of the businesses wise, I push them to use the students, right? And that's one thing that, I would say tick a little bit a box about, making sure that the businesses are actually moving on and dragging the next generation along. And I see that as one of the first social sort of aspects of it that can happen. And of course, there's a risk that we will lose some personnel in the process as well. But, I haven't got around to how to keep their profits in the country, though. I haven't reached there yet.
Thank you. I probably should have tried to summarize that question. Apologies. But it was also quite a substantial one. You did very well, Siah. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue.
Hi, Sue.
I'm really interested in the whole aspect of decent work, obviously. And I am just wondering, in terms of your involvement with the businesses with the internships, how much evaluation do you do of whether the businesses are providing decent work?
May I just summarize that for the Zoom attendees again? So the question is, in terms of the internships, to what extent there is some level of oversight or understanding whether decent work takes place?
Yeah, for any internships, we do have certain projects that sticks to it. So in other words, there is a remit around certain projects. In other words, it can't be just photocopying, well, they may have to make some photocopying in the meantime or some coffee, but for the bulk of it, we will have a supervisor that sticks on to the student that makes sure, and then of course the first negotiation process is normally between the directors or senior level at the CAPES to be able to negotiate with the company as to what projects we are talking about, right before they actually go into an internship, and we expect an output rather than just internship for the sake of internship. Right, so there's no chance that the internship that we will do is something there's a chance the student just get a very, very weak experience rather than a very substantial one around any feasibility study or market assessment study of opportunities in Southeast Asia. And we partner this with a lot of different agencies that have connectivity with businesses who are interested in Southeast Asia or who are already there trying to do more. And understanding. As I said to Alan as well, we don't normally do it many times for one single business because otherwise it becomes almost like a cheap consulting. Right? As well as probably we also don't do anything for consulting companies because then we'll be doing free consulting for consulting companies, which is bad. We are better off doing this for the business school, right?
That's right.
I hope that addressed a bit of your question, Sue.
Yeah, I was just interested in whether you look at companies and their employment practices and their, I guess, whether they are actually complying with the sustainable development goals as well.
I think in that way, right? We can only access them in terms of whether they have interest in those markets, right? Rather than whether they are aligning with the 17 of them. But I presume that they are probably going after growth, right? Which of course will be extremely useful. And if we are trying to protect some of these small, medium enterprises or micro enterprises, it makes sense to help them along on those things. As to whether they comply with some of these or not, we don't normally go too much in detail. As long as they make sure that decent work is done, right, using the student and decent outputs actually happens.
But I think it's a very valuable question to ask in this climate where attitudes are changing. Yes, just behind.
I just want to ask you, Seth, how does PRME measure? How do I know the impact you make?
Very good question. Like everybody else, we provide some reporting. Ours isn't quite as fancy as Siah's. So we write a report every 2 years, and it's called a Sharing Information on Progress report. So I do this for the whole business school, and we write a report where we document against the 6 principles of Prime that we have made progress, that we're not standing still, we're moving with the times, and we are in a cycle of continuous improvement where we look, assess, and we try to improve for the subsequent years. And those 6 principles are quite structured. They're about values, they're about research, they're about teaching and learning, how we cultivate those values. But increasingly, the focus has come on to how do the 17 SDGs feature and how do we address them. So this is what our last report did quite explicitly, and our next report, which is due in August, will take this further, and hopefully we will have achieved some progress So our sharing of progress report highlights some improvement. But it's a very important question, and we take it seriously. And Prime will delist members who don't report. And that's, I think, something that's very important to give it that sense that this is an important movement going towards 2030.
I'm happy to share my template with you, if it helps.
2, 3, 5.
I have no idea how my team work out these numbers, but it works.
Very impressive, yes.
Hi, I'm Barbara Allen from the
Barbara.
School of Government. Just wondering where your students are coming from. Are you looking for them? Are they coming to you? Or are you connected with particular courses? And I say that because School of Government might not be your obvious target, but I have some Masters of Public Management students. Really good, very interesting.
Yeah. They could be targets, right? Because you see the kind of regimes that I normally set up, right? Because I emphasize two things, right? One is, understanding the New Zealand's perspective, right? Both government and the business end of things, of course. But I'm also very keen to make sure that we know the perspective of what ASEAN wants from us, right? Whether they are governments or businesses as well. And I think, talking about supply and demand, sometimes you don't even know who is the supplier, who is the demand, right? And so I think most of our activities, we go social media. So we always call for interest in our activities. I don't think I've come across any instances where I have to keep shoulder tapping people, like, hey, come drag somebody across Lambton Quay or whatever, right? Or from the LT2 just to participate. Now, for example, the teammate process that I mentioned, Nelson and Christchurch in July, we haven't called for it, but I think it should be out in about 2 weeks nationwide, and we normally promote it across the 8 universities. Right? So as long as the 8 universities, marketing and comms doesn't malfunction, right, they should be able to spread the love around, right? So, in Victoria, we do spread around as well through our own comms. But we can always make sure that, if you say that the school government needs to be on the sort of the list of people to email, just let me know. It's no problem at all. I'm sure it cross-lab because we work quite closely with NFED and NZTE as well, and a lot of other agencies, because somehow or rather, it's not just New Zealand out there. The government runs like businesses, right? Or the government runs around the businesses or run down the businesses, right? So they necessarily own a lot of businesses or have so much to say in the business environment out there, which is slightly different from how we operate here. But, feel free. And our activities, we encourage spread across the country though. So as much as I love all the Victoria University students, I can only give them the appropriate proportion, right? So that we are nationwide as well for that matter. Can I still jump back to Alan's question? Because I'm still lingering about that. You have asked me many times that same question, so obviously I haven't provided any answers like that is substantial enough. But I must say that, I see us interacting and training with businesses, but actually in the grand scheme of things, we are actually not the direct customer-facing people. Right, so when I say we are not the direct customer-facing people, we are, say for example the businesses, right? So we are training them, but we are training them so that NZTE can take over at some stage to help them along, pushing a bit further into those markets. Now we are also training them because, say for example, our partnership, between NZTE, because NZTE can only help so many enterprises, so the rest they just don't know what to do. So they will pass it on to, say for example, the ASEAN New Zealand Business Council, and the ASEAN New Zealand Business Council doesn't really earn money, so they really only do membership, and they don't train businesses properly, right? So they will pass it back to us, and we will train for all the 2 institutions, NZTE as well as the ASEAN New Zealand Business Council, before they actually go to the next step. So we are part of that larger ecosystem as well, without being sort of like first and equal in the customer-facing side for businesses. But we are definitely the number one facing one among the ecosystem. We are the number one facing one for the students because we are part of the university system. So.
Thank you for addressing that. Yes, Arthur.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks very much, Lawrence from School as well. When you're thinking about the economic growth angle here, SDG 8, are you thinking about that for firms in New Zealand, promoting New Zealand's economic growth through interaction with Southeast Asia? Or are you thinking about it from the perspective of the Southeast Asian countries and what's going to be useful for them in terms of promoting their economic growth, presumably in a way that's also consistent with the other 16 SDGs.
Well, I might be in the wrong job if I actually do the second one, because the remit of the CCAPE is actually to look after New Zealanders only, right? So New Zealanders and New Zealand organizations only. So when I talk about economic growth, right, it necessarily goes down 2 steps, right? Presumably at some stage when exports work, or, you know, when we have actually more of the kind of productivity as a result of that connectivity, right, it should come in the form of economic growth for the country, productivity or export-wise. But then if you go down 1 step, then we actually have to enable businesses who can actually provide that sort of like the next layer of firms, right? So we are not just, of course, not to single out individual firms, but, you know, we are not just going to just rely on food like Fonterra or Zespri. We are just going to think about digital, which we are very strong in that space. We are just going to think about nutraceuticals or healthcare stuff, to which we can actually grow the economy, right? As well as, well, you grow these firms, but you also grow the economy as a result of growing these firms, because they also have to hire people, and some of these people are actually our students, and so on and so forth. So part of my training process also try to make sure that we match up students with the, the jobs as well, right? So interestingly, I think some of the schools own the MIT, not the Manukau Institute of Technology, but the Master of International Trade, right? So one of my previous summer scholar, right, works with me and an NFET project on summer scholarship, right, which we do it almost every year, and subsequently she get hired into the the APEC team as well, NFET as well. So this kind of setup is actually quite nice, and in one of the cases, one of our undergrad students actually get a job in Wellington Chamber of Commerce, because they are actually close collaborators to us, and, you know, they want to be part of the process of the kind of students that engage with us deeply, and they go through an interview process, of course.
Rephrase this question. If I was sitting in one of the Southeast Asian countries, would I see some benefits from what you're doing?
They will benefit from what New Zealand can offer when it comes to the ability around our creative industries, or our high value add nutraceuticals products or healthcare systems, and the ability, say for example, to have high quality process in terms of producing food and all sorts of things as well, because there's not arable land is limited, so they need a lot of technologies when it comes to all those processes as well. So that's where they gain, right? And their gains is actually our gain as well, right? As a result of training them in some ways, right? So, for example, I know that New Zealand is working with Singapore very closely with the agency called A-STAR, which is the national science, arena to which they house all the scientific innovation. I thought you would know that one.
Thank you very much. I think this is a perfect point to draw the seminar to a close. So thank you very much, Siah. Thank you very much to the audience in the room. Thank you very much to everybody on Zoom. And just before you leave us, I would like to show our schedule again. So if you would like to ask Alan questions, that will be in 2 weeks' time. If you would like to ask Arthur questions, that will be in about 3 months' time. So get your questions ready, and please join us for this seminar series. This is the link again, how you sign up. And then I would ask you to thank Siah and also his team who have been supporting and getting this set up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.